every scene should drive your story forward. So what happens when one doesn't? I know, it's tough, it's hard. It feels like you're sacrificing your children up for the slaughter. But Stephen King says, kill your darlings, even if it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart, kill your darlings. These can be unnecessary backstory, scenes that are too long, and interactions that don't carry the reader deeper into the tale. We happen to have another question today that lines up with this topic. What if my story has a random scene that doesn't really fit, but kinda does? An excellent question! The first thing you need to do in the potential elimination process is identify the purpose of your scene. The part that kind of fits. Find the reason you don't want to cut the scene. What about it is something that you don't want to give up, that you think lends something to the story that you can't live without. Dwell on it. Ask yourself what the story and the characters benefit from this one scene. Ask yourself whether the reader is going to find this a break in the action or a build-up. Ask yourself whether the book would be stronger without it. And if you can't make up your mind, put some distance between yourself and your story for a week, a month, or longer. Solstein says when you come back to the book, the weakest scene will jump out at you. Sometimes you have to cut everything but that kind of fitting part, and that will wind up going somewhere else, where it really fits. And just remember that these cut scenes could offer later insight into the story. You'll probably never use them word for word, but it's possible a situation or a particularly witty comeback you cut could wind up coming back later on in the story or in another story. I read once in an interview that Owen Colfer, in his novel Artemis Fowl, included a lot of the Fowl family history into this first novel. His editor advised him to cut it, and though he was disappointed at the time, Mr. Colfer later realized that it was the right thing to do. Several years later, when he was writing book 6 in the Artemis Fowl series, he resurrected a lot of this information because it now pertained to the story. This is why I am leery about deleting anything. But some authors do feel that saving cut material is a bog that weighs you down. To each their own, I guess. Sometimes it is best for the whole of the book to cut a scene or two or 50 or even an entire character to determine whether something or someone needs to go. Look at what its purpose is. Does it extend to the entire plot? Or does one of your characters only serve a single purpose? Does a long scene or entire chapter do nothing more than offer a look at character interaction or a day in the life? Such scenes can be useful in setting the tone for your story, but you don't want to drag them out too long. Less is more, dude. One of my favorite examples of this merciless cutting comes from The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I didn't even know this chapter existed until I began the Good Parts version. All my father used to say at that point was, what with one thing and another, 3 years passed. And then he'd explain how the day came when Buttercup was officially introduced to the world as the coming queen, and how the great square of Florin City was filled as never before, awaiting her introduction, and by then, he was in the terrific business dealing with the kidnapping. Would you believe that in the original Morgenstern, this is the longest single chapter in the book? 15 pages about how Humperdinck can't marry a common subject, so they fight and argue with the nobles and finally make Buttercup Princess of Hammersmith, which was this little lump of land attached to the rear of King Lotherin's holdings. Then the Miracle Man began improving King Lotherin, and 18 pages are used up in the describing the cures. Morgenstern hated doctors and was always bitter when they outlawed Miracle Men from working on Florin proper. And 72, count 'em, 72 pages on the training of a princess. He follows Buttercup day to day, month to month, as she learns all the ways of curtsying and tea-pouring and how to address visiting nabobs and like that. All this in a satiric vein, naturally, since Morgenstern hated royalty even more than doctors. But from a narrative point of view, in 105 pages, nothing happens. Except this. What with one thing and another, 3 years passed. So when you're editing your story, think of it as the Good Parts version. If nothing happens, cut it. After all, every scene should drive the story forward. It's painful, but it must be done.